Chapter 13. Shanna. My experience with private jets included a handful of movies and a Google search when Maggie offered to fly me to Sicily with the family. Suffice to say, nothing prepared me for the reality of stepping foot on one. Creamy leather armchairs and 2 couches filled the main cabin. However, Mr. Gulfstream, or whoever designed the plane, had set them in small seating areas rather than rows. A large screen TV hung on one wall, and a bar area took up the back corner. The aircraft reminded me of a super swanky RV. Still speaking Italian into his phone, Enzo nodded for me to sit. I tuned him out and made myself comfy. Dahlia dropped her carry-on next to her seat and wandered to the kitchen area. "Well, we won't starve."
"We could last a few months on the food Evelyn keeps on board."
Jessie plopped onto the couch.
"Help yourselves. I'm going to sleep."
"Good idea. Shanna and I will take the master suite." Enzo closed the distance between us and wrapped me in his arms. The women exchanged glances. I had no idea the plane had a bed, let alone a master suite, but the mere mention of sleep made my eyes droop. "If that's okay. I'm okay with curling up on the couch."
"Of course it's okay. After all the kissing at the reception, I'd rather not watch you two go at it."
Jessie laughed. Dahlia, on the other hand, chewed her lower lip, a sure sign she was worried. "There won't be any going at it. I'm exhausted." I took a step away from him and winked at Dahlia. She raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow. Enzo's phone rang again. He glanced at the screen and frowned. "It's my assistant manager. There's a problem with a delivery. I should take this." "Go ahead." He walked to the back of the plane and disappeared into what I assumed was the master suite. Oddly enough, his constant phone calls gave me a sense of hope. The restaurant was a huge part of his life, a part I could support, unlike the whole mafia thing. Dahlia stared after him and then turned to me. "Are you sure you want to share a bed with him?" "Sure, why not? I'm not planning on joining the Mile High Club." I hiked my bag higher on my shoulder. Keeping her voice low, she said, "Besides the fact you've been yo-yoing back and forth about your feelings for him?" She was right, but I had my reasons. Reasons I couldn't tell her. "There's nothing wrong with spending more time with Enzo." I'm all for women embracing their sexual natures. But I know you. Sleeping with him will only confuse things. "Thanks for worrying about me, but I can handle it." I didn't need a PhD in psychology to know her concern had more to do with leaving Leo at the villa than me getting my freak on with Enzo. "You're right. It's been a long day. We should all get some sleep." She shook her head. Jessie motioned between us.
"I don't mean to butt into your conversation, but I've known Enzo my entire life. He doesn't date much."
I'd met Jessie at Gabe's bar a few months earlier. We weren't close, but I liked her. More importantly, I believed she was the type of person who called it like she saw it. Dahlia gave me a pointed look. Exactly my point. He doesn't date, but he has no shortage of female attention.
"Actually, he's not a playboy either,"
Jessie sighed.
"He's a workaholic, and mostly keeps to himself."
I struggled to reconcile the different sides of Enzo. How's it possible a rich, handsome, successful guy like him didn't have women falling at his feet every night? But he's had relationships.
"2 that I can think of. And I don't mean Nicolina."
She glanced away. Dahlia turned to me. "The Marchionnis aren't like regular men. They're complicated." Nodding, Jessie pressed her lips together. "Understatement of the year." I wanted the conversation to end. Unfortunately, Dahlia had more to say. Even if they aren't involved with another woman, they aren't exactly free to do what they want. Did Leo tell her about the family business? I know, doll. Believe me, I know. I stared, waiting and hoping she'd let something slip. She waved her hand as if to erase the topic. Don't mind me. I'm worried about Leo and putting all my crap on you. A good friend would have comforted her, but I couldn't do that. Not when it meant running the risk of saying more than I should, or asking the wrong questions. I hated keeping secrets from her. One more reason I should run far and fast from Enzo. But I can't. Truth be told, I'm in way too deep. As if on cue, he returned and took my bag. We need to buckle in for takeoff. Come sit with me. 2 things I hated about flying: leaving the ground and returning. I plopped down next to him and fastened my seatbelt, pulled the strap as tight as it would go, and double-checked it. He lifted a brow and grinned as if amused. I hate takeoffs and landings. The plane rolled forward, and I gripped the armrests. Enzo cupped my cheek and turned my face toward his. It's mind over matter. You don't mind and I don't matter? As the plane picked up speed, he leaned in and kissed me like he meant it. Dahlia said something, but between Enzo's tongue tangoing with mine and the roar of the engines, I couldn't hear her. Enzo continued to lick and suck and nibble my lips until our ascent slowed. Grinning, he eased back. Ready for bed? Sure. I could practically feel the heat of his stare boring into my backside as I walked to the master suite. One glance over my shoulder confirmed my suspicions. Not only did I catch him in the act, he gave me an unapologetic wink. There's a private bathroom with a shower. You can go first. He lowered his voice. Or we could share. Is he propositioning me? Why, yes, I believe he is. My heart did a happy dance, but my brain turned off the music. I think I'll wait until we are on the ground to shower. Meeting my eyes, he said, Why do I get the feeling you're having second thoughts about being in here with me? Because I'm not the only one who pays attention. I itched to touch him, but Dahlia's warning played through my head. I don't know what this is between us. We're friends, but a little sex never hurt anyone. You might want to ask Maggie and Gabe the complications a little sex can cause. I bypassed the bathroom. A bed wasn't much better than a shower, but sleeping didn't require nudity. I need a nap. Enzo's face fell. He'd propositioned me all right, but he'd used friends in the same sentence. I should have felt relieved. After all, I was an unemployed wannabe PI. I didn't have a lot to bring into a relationship. However, that didn't stop me from teetering on the edge of seriously falling for him. How awkward would that be? My best friend was married to his brother. It's not like I could ghost him, like he had me. I kicked off my shoes and flopped onto the bed. Would you like some company? Or should I go back into the main cabin? Like I told Dahlia, I'm a grown woman. I can sleep beside you without accidentally rolling over and impaling myself on your penis. He sat beside me and tapped the side of my head. What's going on in there? We're friends? I met his gaze. Yes? Just friends. We've fooled around a little, so that makes us friends with benefits. But this isn't a relationship, right? He stretched out beside me. A friendship is a relationship. You know what I mean. He furrowed his brow, as if struggling to find the right words. My heart broke a little more with each passing second. It's a simple question. It's hardly a simple question, Shanna. He scratched the stubble on his jaw. I'm in this with you, whatever it is. But I despise the term friends with benefits. Me too. Let's not label it. Let's just see where whatever this is goes. I like the sound of that. Pulling me against his chest, he kissed my lips, likely to shut me up. Enzo drew my bottom lip into his mouth and bit until I moaned. That's all it took for the two of us to turn into a tangle of limbs. That was the problem with skipping labels and going with the flow. Our river was full of rapids and led straight to a freaking waterfall. He broke free long enough to tug my shirt off and toss it to the side. "Take your jeans off." I stared awestruck as he reached over his shoulder and pulled his shirt over his head. Holy 8-pack, Batman! I'd seen plenty of cut guys, but Enzo took sculpted abs to an entirely new level. Tanned skin, a dusting of hair between his pecs, and ripple after ripple of muscle. For the first time, I understood why he'd wanted me naked in the limo. In fact, I could get behind Enzo in his birthday suit 24/7. Shanna, standing beside the bed, he grinned and ran his hand down the front of his pants. "Your jeans. What is it with you ordering me to undress?" I managed to undo the top button before he distracted me again. Seriously, how's a girl supposed to concentrate when a man like Enzo Marchionni takes off his pants? What is it with you arguing with me on every turn? He reached for me, but stopped short when I scrambled out of the bed and dropped to my knees. "I'll take them off in a minute." I curled my fingers around the waistband of his boxer briefs and pulled them down his strong thighs. I wasn't exactly a stranger to his cock, but he'd remained mostly clothed during our previous encounters. Much like my reaction to the plane, I was ill-prepared for the reality of coming face-to-face with it. Most men had either length or width. Some had neither. But Enzo? He had both. So much so, I rethought my decision to give him a blowjob. He ran his hand over his length, and the damned thing grew larger. Not helping. Gripping the base, I rolled my tongue over the tip. He closed his eyes and sucked in a breath. Curling his fingers in my hair, he hissed, "Fuck." I glanced up at his face, winked, and got down to business. It took me a few seconds to get my rhythm, but when I did, his entire body trembled. He seemed to be holding back as if afraid to lose control. We can't have that, now can we? I increased the tempo and tightened my grip. A deep rumbling groan spilled from his lips. "Stop." I didn't stop until he finished. He jerked his hips back, grabbed my shoulders, and hoisted me to my feet. Slanting his mouth over mine, he parted my lips with his tongue and kissed me like he meant it. I'm talking a full-body kiss with groping and grinding. My body sparked like a downed power line. I stepped back, turned around, and popped each button. Bending at the waist, I slid my jeans down my legs. "I'm so fucking glad I didn't give you a quickie in the backseat of the limo." Enzo lowered his voice to a sexy growl. "I'm going to spend every minute of this flight exploring every inch of your body." The knowledge that this incredible man wanted me so fiercely thrilled and terrified me. He wasn't just a hot guy at a masked ball anymore. I knew him. I knew his secrets and his fears. If we crossed the line, if we gave in to the passion, I didn't think I would survive it if he ghosted me again. "Shanna?" He turned me to face him. "What's wrong?" The complete 180 from growled lust to tenderness surprised me. I stared into his eyes, dumbstruck. Who am I kidding? Sex or no sex, I'm in too deep to escape this in one piece. "I'm moving too fast, and you're tired." Enzo embraced me. "Forgive me." Another chunk fell off the wall around my heart. "It's not that." "Talk to me." He lifted my chin. I don't know what he saw in my expression, but he drew a deep breath. "I've given you no reason to believe me, but I meant what I said. I'm in this with you." "Careful, Marchionni. That sounds dangerously close to an actual relationship." I'd gone for snark, but my quivering voice belied my efforts. "A little danger doesn't scare me." He pulled back the duvet. Let's get some sleep. I settled between the softest sheets ever in the history of sheets, but I had a better chance of contracting Ebola mid-flight than falling asleep. His habit of answering questions without answering not only drove me nuts, it left me confused. I knew two things for certain. One, I wanted to spend more time with him. And two, walking away now would hurt. Walking away later would be worse. But didn't some philosopher once say it was better to love and have your heart pulverized than never to have loved at all? Either way, I have to take the leap before I can fly, or splatter on the pavement. When you said you wanted me to stay with you until things were settled with the Lazios, what did you have in mind?
Chapter 14. Enzo. The plane had landed in New Orleans a half hour earlier, but I couldn't bring myself to wake Shanna. We talked and laughed and made out like a couple of teenagers for the first half of the flight. She'd fallen asleep in the middle of a conversation, but I didn't mind. Holding her in the quiet cabin felt special, different, more intimate than any sexual experience. I brushed her hair back and kissed her forehead. Shanna opened her eyes and jerked upright. "Holy hell, you scared the crap out of me. Were you watching me sleep?" "No." I turned my head to hide my grin. She ran her fingers through her bed-rumpled hair. "Are we there yet?" "We landed 30 minutes ago." "Why didn't you wake me?" She glanced around, presumably for her clothes. "You were out. I didn't want to disturb you until our car arrived." I stood and handed her a robe. "I put your jeans and top in with my dirty laundry. Your carry-on is in the bathroom. Do you need the larger suitcase?" "I have a change of clothes in the small bag." Shanna yawned and flashed me a bright smile. "Is this what it's going to be like staying with you? Having you wait on me hand and foot?" My first instinct was to bristle, but it dawned on me I enjoyed taking care of her. "Are you complaining?" "No, it's just surprising. You don't strike me as the roses and chocolates kind of guy." "I'm not. Maybe you bring it out in me." "I think I like your nice guy side." She stood and slid into the robe. Don't let the bossy, arrogant prick side hear you say that. It seemed like a shame to cover her gorgeous body with yards of terry cloth, but the sooner I got her off the plane, the sooner I could get her undressed again. Maybe next time we'll get past third base. She laughed and wandered into the bathroom. A split second later, she poked her head out. "Where are Jessie and Dahlia?" "They left shortly after we landed." "By themselves?" I could practically hear the gears turning in her head. "Gabe arranged for Jessie to have security for the foreseeable future. She's running his bar." "And Dahlia?" Her voice thinned. "Said she didn't need it. She's headed to her parents' house in Baton Rouge. I doubted anyone would bother her, but I would have rather she be safe than attending her funeral." I disagreed, but Leo said to let her go. Shanna gave me an odd look. "You know her father is the governor, right?" The news hit me like a gut punch. I most certainly did not know. Why didn't Leo tell me that when I called? No, but it explains a lot. "Give me 5. She ducked back into the bathroom. "Take your time. I'll be in the main cabin." I pulled my cell from my pocket and called Gabe. "Are you at the house?" Between his lack of greeting and clipped tone, I assumed this day hadn't gone well. "We're leaving soon. Any word from Palermo?" Gabe took so long to reply, I pulled the phone from my ear to check the connection. "You could say that." He sucked in a breath. "The Lazios deny any involvement with the incidents in the old city and the church, and came back with a couple of demands." I glanced at the door joining the main cabin to the master's suite. The last thing I needed was Shanna overhearing bits of the conversation. "What do they want?" "Time and money, the usual." He cleared his throat. What the hell is he hiding? I stared at my cell as if it had the answers. Gabe had to expect the Lazios to ask for time to find other means of laundering their dirty money. Replacements didn't come cheap. None of this should have come as a surprise, and yet he seemed rattled. "Is that it?" "No. They want you." "Come again?" My entire world tilted. "They want a Marchionni-Lazio marriage before they will agree to my terms." Fuck. I sank onto the couch. My brain spun like a roulette wheel. Damn it, Nico. What did you do? Have you given them an answer? What the hell do you think I told them? He laughed, but it lacked humor. You don't even like Nico. You honestly think I'd force you into an arranged marriage with her? If it meant he'd succeed in taking the family legit, yes, I did. No, of course not. But Pops wants to use you as a peace offering, I know, but he's not calling the shots. I am. We'll see. Thanks for not selling me off like cattle. This time you laughed like you meant it. I love you, bro. Don't ever forget it. I wanted to believe he'd stick to his guns, but Gabe was a married man with a house full of kids to think about. They were his first priority. Between our father and the Lazios, it wasn't a question of if the shit would hit the fan. The question was when and how many walls would be covered in it. Where will that leave me? I need to go. I'll text you when we get to the house. I leaned forward to stop the room from spinning. Shanna walked into the main cabin with her bag slung over her shoulder. What's the plan? I tucked my phone into my pocket and put on a happy fucking face. Should take us about a half hour to get to the Garden District. We're staying at your parents' house? She glanced from me to the door as if planning to bolt. It has better security than my place. Besides, no one's there except the staff. I took her carry-on from her. Push comes to shove, I wasn't above holding it hostage to force her to accompany me. We'll have guards until we reach the house. We won't need them after that, unless we go out. Do you really think someone would take a shot at you here? Anything was possible once Nico learned her little plan hadn't worked. No, but better safe than sorry. Ready? She nodded and exited the plane. The ever-present odors of brackish water and fish assaulted me the moment my feet touched the tarmac. 30 seconds after I left the air-conditioned plane, the thick Louisiana air clung to me like wet linen. It's good to be home. I held Shanna's hand as we walked to the waiting town car. Eyeing our bodyguards, she whispered, I would want to run into one of them in a dark alley. The only thing you need to worry about running into in the dark is me. I nudged her side to lighten the mood. It didn't work for either of us. I needed to get a grip, or I'd screw things up with her before they started. Would you feel more comfortable if I drove and they followed in the second car? Her eyes widened. Yes, please. I didn't know that was allowed, or I would have asked. They work for me. I'm the one who decides what is and isn't allowed. Shanna smirked. I guess I'll take the devil I know over the devils wearing black fatigues, since I have the choice. I couldn't help but feel we were playing a game of semantics, but I rephrased my former sentence in an effort to please her. They work for us. You have every right to tell them or me what you want. I can do that. I have absolutely no doubt in your ability to speak your mind. I kissed her cheek and strode to the waiting security team. The men weren't thrilled when I gave them new instructions, but they complied. 5 minutes later, I slid into the driver's seat with Shanna riding shotgun. I'd like to get some things from my place and check on my cat. I also need my laptop to start my job search. She wrapped her fingers around mine. I lifted her hand to my lips. Before we start making plans, there's something I'd like to talk to you about. That sounds ominous. I spoke to Gabe. We'd like to offer you a position at Marchionni Corp. In the research department. Doing what exactly? She didn't sound the least bit thrilled with the offer. I hadn't thought through the details, so I made it up on the fly. Researching potential acquisitions, completing background checks, that sort of thing. I'll think about it. Shanna turned her head, but not before I caught the disappointment in her eyes. You hate the idea. Well, yeah. I'm not crazy about working for a company I know is into illegal activities. She shifted to face me. Which reminds me, I'd like to officially take back what I said about you taking over for your father. It's a terrible idea. I'd expected this sort of reaction when I'd first told her my family was part of the mafia, but she'd taken it fairly well. It never occurred to me she'd have a problem with the job offer. The Marchionni Corporation itself isn't involved in illegal activities. Then how does it all work? I couldn't get into the nitty-gritty of operations, but hopefully I could tell her enough to satisfy her curiosity. The company purchases failing hospitality businesses, bars, hotels, restaurants. I know how it works. The company's like the one Edward Lewis runs in Pretty Woman. Not sure I follow. She gave me a dubious look. Tell me you've seen the movie. Julia Roberts, Richard Gere? It's been ages, but yes, I'm acquainted with the film. Richard Gere's character runs a company that buys failing businesses and chops them up and sells them to the highest bidder. A memory of the movie prickled the back of my mind. Yes, except sometimes we save the failing company before we sell it. Right, but where do the Lazios and the other families fit in? She lowered her voice. Several of the companies you bought claimed they were successful, and your father's company sabotaged them to force the sale. Her assessment surprised me. She'd hit far too close to the truth for my liking. When you put it like that, it sounds nefarious, but the reality is many businesses operate in the same manner. If it's not illegal, why are the Lazios so desperate to stay partners? I should have known better than to give her a candy-coated version of the situation, but I'd gone too far to turn back. Sometimes the company keeps the businesses we acquire. My restaurant and Gabe's bar, for example. She nodded. Bars are one of the few places that still move a lot of cash. I glanced at her to gauge her reaction. Her eyes widened. And mobsters are notorious for running restaurants because they make a perfect front for receiving and distributing illegal goods. Correct. Sitting back, she grew quiet. Are you moving drugs through Enzo's? I honestly don't know what is in the shipments. I pulled into my parents' driveway and punched the security code into the panel. I don't like it. I don't want to work for a company involved in anything close to illegal. My mouth went dry. Does this change the way you feel about me? About you as a person? No. But I'm freaked out you would even consider taking your father's position. Turning to face her, I took her hands in mine. Do you remember the way the people in Comiso reacted to seeing my family? Yes. They treated you like rock stars. It's not because we are a part of the Cosa Nostra. It's because my family has given countless dollars to the community. We've opened schools and hospitals and social service programs that make a difference in people's lives. More than that, we protect them. If the Marchionnis leave Sicily, the next family who takes over may not be as generous. You're telling me you're a mobster with a heart of gold? She frowned. The money and power and prestige mean nothing to you? I won't lie. Those things are nice to have. I released her hands. But this is all a moot point. My father will never allow me to take over, nor will Gabe. I get it now. I do. But after what happened in Sicily, I'm scared for you and the rest of your family. She brushed my hair from my eyes. Maybe you could find a way to continue to support the community without going to the dark side? In a perfect world, that would be my dream. The world doesn't have to be perfect to have dreams, Enzo. She smiled. But we should get out of the car. The bodyguards are getting restless, and I have to start looking for a job. How do you feel about taking a day to relax before we return to the real world? Just us. No interruptions. I'll have to check my schedule. Shanna stepped out of the car and stared as the gate closed behind us. I'd lived in the house since grade school. The white stone walls and security cameras didn't bother me. They were a part of life, but I could understand how they might make one feel trapped. It looks a lot different without a party going on. She forced a smile. I pulled her into an embrace. We'll stay here tonight. If you're still uncomfortable tomorrow, we'll go to my place in the quarter, okay? Thanks. I'd like that. This time her smile brightened her eyes. Hildy, my mother's housekeeper, and my former nanny met us at the front door. The woman was as old as my folks, but looked twice their age. Bringing up 6 rambunctious boys had taken its toll. Hildy, this is my friend Shanna. Shanna, this is Hildy. She's worked for my family for as long as I can remember. She pretty much raised us. Hildy smiled and sandwiched Shanna's hand in hers. Welcome. I'm so happy to see you again. Nice to see you too. I felt like an ass. Forgive me, I forgot the two of you met the night of the gala. Nothing to forgive, but it's nice to see you using some of the manners I taught you. She winked at Shanna. You must be good for him. He's good for me too. Ignoring Hildy's knowing look, I set my hand on the small of Shanna's back and led her into the house. Home sweet home. She stopped in the foyer and took a look around at the gleaming white marble, white couches, white lilies on the entryway table. I can't imagine growing up here. The formal rooms are a bit sterile for my tastes. Come on, let me show you the den. I dropped our bags near the door. Hildy took a step forward, but I held up my hand. Don't you dare try to carry those upstairs. I'll get them later. The woman arched an eyebrow. Telling me how to do my job? No, I'm giving you a vacation. Take a break while my parents are out of town. You deserve it. I hugged her for the first time since I'd been in high school. When I was a child, Hildy was my one source of affection, but her frail body felt foreign to me. When did she get so old? She tensed for a half second before tightening her grip on me. Thank you, Enzo. But I wasn't going to carry them myself. I was going to have Rupert take care of them. How many people does my mother have working here? 4, but I'm the only live-in. She patted my arm. Go show your guest around. I'll make the 2 of you some lunch. You're not going to take my advice and take it easy for a few days. I knew she wouldn't, but I couldn't resist teasing her like I had when I was young. And die of boredom sipping lemonade by the pool? Hildy smirked. Besides, it'd take me a week to get the kitchen back in order after you were done with it. Shanna covered her mouth, likely to hide her smile. You may have a point. I motioned to the hall. We'll be in the den.
Chapter 15. Shanna. The den, as Enzo called it, was the biggest man cave I'd ever seen. Besides the oversized brown leather sectional and widescreen television, it had a pool table, air hockey, and 3 pinball machines. This is like Guy Nirvana. I wandered to the floor-to-ceiling shelves to check out a model boat. That's a replica of the family yacht. Enzo shoved his hands in the back pockets of his jeans. He'd seemed off since the conversation in the car, but I doubted his nerves had anything to do with bringing a girl home to meet Mom. 1, we weren't actually dating, and 2, his parents were on another continent. He'd shocked me with his honesty. Given the nature of the family business, I'd expected him to be his normally elusive self. That he seemed concerned I would think less of him touched my heart. It made me believe he'd meant it when he said he was in this with me. Eve's delight? I giggled because deep down I had the sense of humor of a 12-year-old boy. Plus, I hoped a little silliness would snap him out of his dark mood. My father named it. I figured. Conjures up all sorts of disturbing images, doesn't it? I wiggled my brows. Thanks for that. His ears turned red. I never would have believed it possible for a Marchionni to blush. I took it as a challenge to see if I could make his ears turn magenta. Funny, though, I thought Eve's delight would be bigger, longer, maybe more girth. How can someone so cute have such a dirty mind? He draped his arms over my shoulders and gave me a real smile. It goes with my filthy mouth. I motioned back to the model. How big is the real thing? 47 feet. It's great for getting around the Gulf. Big boats are hard to get into small ports. He leaned in to kiss me, but stopped and arched a brow. What? I bit my lip, fighting to hold in more laughter. He pressed his lips together as if to keep from grinning. I'm almost afraid to ask. I was just thinking, I bet you'd do a splendid job fitting your vessel into my small port. Keep talking like that, and I'm going to throw you over my shoulder and take you upstairs. I'd like to see you try. Understatement of the century. After what felt like weeks of foreplay, I was more than ready. Enzo lunged for me, grabbed my hips, and lifted me off the floor. I wrapped my legs around his waist and arms around his neck. What happens upstairs? I plan to put your dirty mind and filthy mouth to good use. He captured my lower lip in his teeth. The nibble sent a shot of electricity from my mouth to my toes and everywhere between. Isn't Hildy making us lunch? She'll leave it in the kitchen. He leaned in to kiss me again, and his phone rang. Damn it. It's work again. I squirmed until he set me down. Go ahead. He frowned at the screen. I'll be quick. I left the room to give him some privacy. After wandering the halls and taking several turns, I doubted I'd find my way back to him without a map. I should leave a trail of breadcrumbs. In the end, I followed the scent of Cajun seasoning to the kitchen. Hildy glanced up from the stove and smiled. Do you need something? Water would be great. I pointed to the fridge. May I? Help yourself. She dumped 2 handfuls of shrimp into the pot and stirred. Where's Enzo? He had a call. I settled at the kitchen island with my water. This house is huge. I can't imagine being the one to clean it. It's easier now that the boys are grown, but I don't do it alone. Hildy settled on a stool beside me. Have you and Enzo been dating long? Oh, no, we aren't dating. Hildy's eyes twinkled with mischief. It only takes a second to fall in love. I knew the first moment I saw my husband. With anyone else, I'd argue, call them delusional, and dismiss their advice as romantic BS. But I wanted to believe her. Or maybe my attitude change had nothing to do with Hildy, and everything to do with my feelings for Enzo. I swallowed past the emotion clogging my throat. How do you know? I mean, how do you know they'll love you back? She leaned closer, as if afraid someone would overhear. You have nothing to worry about. I saw the way he looked at you when you weren't watching. He's quite taken with you. I nodded, though I doubted her assessment. You don't believe me? Hildy chuckled. You are the first woman he has brought home. Not like he had much of a choice. Or did he? He offered to take me to his place tomorrow, but had practically insisted we come to his parents' house. Enzo Marchionni wants me here. I smiled and turned to the pictures lining the shelves in the breakfast nook. May I? Of course. She followed me. My husband and I couldn't have children of our own. It was my pleasure to take care of the boys for Evelyn and Joe. I lifted a framed photo of 6 boys. Which one is Enzo? Look close and you tell me. I studied the image. 4 of the kids were grouped together, while 2 stood alone. The tall loner had to be Joe Jr. He looked older than the rest. I squinted at the other boy and recognized Enzo by the way he dipped his chin. Come to think of it, I'd never seen Gabe or the others hold their heads down. That's him. He looks so sad. Hildy nodded. Enzo had the same expression in every picture taken with his brothers. There were several shots of individual boys, but none of him alone. It broke my heart to the point I longed to see a photo of him smiling. Do you have any of just Enzo? Other than his graduation pictures in the family album, no. She frowned and returned to the kitchen. That's so wrong. Gloomy and more than a little pissed off at Evelyn for playing favorites, I turned back to Hildy. You've never met one of Lorenzo's girlfriends? Not a one. I met the dark-haired girl that's sweet on Leo, and Joe Jr.'s wife and Maggie, but Enzo has never brought a woman to meet me. I wrinkled my nose. What about Nicolina Lazio? Hildy muttered something under her breath. Evelyn invited her here a few times over the years. I didn't blame her for her dislike of Nico, but the fact Enzo hadn't brought her here lightened my steps. Can I help with lunch? Hildy pointed toward a china cabinet. Would you set the table? The silver is in the top drawer, plates on the bottom shelf. Lost in thought, I busied myself with the simple chore. While I wanted to believe my being here meant something, I couldn't. The one constant truth in my life was men didn't stick around, not fathers, and especially not lovers. Enzo had proved my point after the gala. Will he ghost me again once the Lazio situation is under control? I thought about him getting into the SUV while everyone said their goodbyes, and the sad little boy in the pictures, and sighed. The Marchionnis hadn't physically abandoned him, but emotionally, he'd grown up feeling alone. We have more in common than I thought. Tell me about the wedding, Hildy said from the kitchen. I wanted to come, but these old bones can't handle long flights. It was beautiful. Gabe had tears in his eyes when he saw Maggie coming down the aisle. I avoided mentioning the rushing crowd and the guns, because it wasn't my place to tell her. Did Evelyn behave herself? She wasn't always a fan of Maggie. Hildy laughed. Evelyn's coming around. It's hard not to love Maggie. She's great. She's been my best friend since high school. She's done a fine job with Joe's kids and little Ella. Does she cook? Hildy made the sign of the cross when she mentioned Enzo's deceased brother. I smiled, thinking only Evelyn did that. Maggie loves to bake, especially when she's angry. She chuckled. She'll be doing a lot of baking being married to that rascal Gabriel. He's changed, grown up a lot. They are really good together. Being a father will do that to a man. She set a pot of gumbo and a muffalata sandwich on the table. I can't wait to see the wedding pictures. I'll send you some candid shots I took on my phone. I'd like that. Enzo came into the kitchen and drew a deep breath. You made your famous gumbo? Started it when you called and said you were coming home. Hildy winked at me. It's his favorite. I'll give you my recipe. He pressed his hand to his chest. Miss Hildy, my mother didn't tell me you were dying. Her smile widened. I'm a little slower these days, but I'm not planning on meeting my maker anytime soon. I figured you must be terminally ill since you swore to take the recipe to the grave. He smirked. 5 minutes alone with Shanna, and you've thrown me over as your favorite. I see how it is. You will always be my favorite. But I can't tell you my secret ingredients, or you'll never come home to visit. She motioned for him to follow her. Watching the two of them in action warmed my heart. Enzo might have felt like an outsider with his brothers, but he hadn't grown up without love. They stopped at the door leading to the patio. Hildy said something to Enzo that made him blush and glance at me. He shook his head, and she pinched his ear. I did my best not to pay them any attention, but it was obvious they were talking about me. Enzo returned to the table, and Hildy hurried down the hall. What was that about? I tried for indifference, but I couldn't stop grinning. She was lecturing me on the merits of marriage and children. She likes you. My mouth fell open. She told you to marry and impregnate me? Pretty much. Why isn't he as freaked out as I am? Sure, I longed for someone to love me enough to stick around, but I knew better than to believe a piece of paper and a baby were guarantees. But she works for your mom. Evelyn would never approve. They're more friends than employer-employee, but Hildy has a mind of her own. I shivered. No offense, but I can live without both. If my biological clock ever starts ticking, I'll hang out with Maggie's bunch for an hour. That'll cure it. Agreed. He laughed. I had Rupert put your things in the room beside mine. We aren't sharing a room? Yes, but I thought you might want some privacy. He took a huge bite of gumbo. Not really. I do, thanks. Enzo slung his arm around me and tugged me close. You're cute when you overthink things. I'm not overthinking. He gave me a yeah right look. Okay, fine. I am. But I hate cute. Tell me I'm beautiful or something. Anything but cute. Nuzzling into my neck, he whispered, You are beautiful. But sometimes you're cute. Like when you're sleeping. I pulled back, wide-eyed. I knew it. You were watching me sleep, like some crazy stalker. He chuckled. You had your hands curled up under your chin, a little drool hanging out of your mouth while you snored. I don't snore. I slapped his arm. I'll let you know tonight.
Chapter 16. Enzo. After the drama in Sicily, an international flight, and bringing a woman to my childhood home, I needed to kick back and relax by the pool. Luckily for me, I had the perfect partner in crime. Even luckier for me, said partner was wet, half naked, and working her way through a bottle of wine. I dove in, swam a couple of laps, and stopped close enough to help myself to Shanna's wine. Hey, get your own. Giggling, she took it out of my hand. How much have you had? Your cheeks are red. She pursed her lips. It was full when I started. I shook the bottle. Not much left. Someone's going to have a wicked hangover in the morning. I needed something to take my mind off things and enjoy my evening. Besides, I don't have to get up early tomorrow. Ah, so you've cleared your calendar for me. Yes, and you should be honored. I don't take an entire day off for just anyone, even if I'm unemployed. She glanced at the dark house. Is Hildy coming back tonight? She's staying with her sister in Metairie. I would have preferred to continue the conversation we'd started in the car when she was sober, but I needed to make sure we were solid. About what we discussed earlier. Shanna reached behind her and untied her bikini top. The blood left my brain for points further south. What are you doing? She set the scraps of material and strings on the deck. Being one with nature. Jesus, Mary and Joseph. Muttering under my breath, I said a silent prayer the security cameras weren't recording the pool area. I like nature. Shanna sank up to her chin in the water and stared at me with her cat-like amber eyes. She dipped below the surface. Without the pool light, I couldn't tell what she'd done or where she'd gone. A relaxing evening swim had turned into something quite different. I dove under and found her a few feet away. Running my hand up her leg, I brushed my fingers across her bikini bottoms. Damn. Having fun? She eased away from me and offered a coy smile. I had to know if you were skinny dipping. I'm not. What happened to becoming one with nature? You don't strike me as shy. I advanced on her. She sidestepped me. What about you? You're wearing a suit. I ducked underwater, removed my swim trunks, and tossed them on the deck. Although it was too dark to see much of anything, Shauna's gaze immediately fell to my lower half. I need more vino. Mind sharing? I moved closer, staying just out of reach. It's almost empty. I'll get more. I swam to the side and hoisted my bare ass out of the water. Her gasp made me smile. Leaving a trail of water in my wake, I entered the kitchen. The tile floor might as well have been covered in oil, but I didn't let the threat of broken tailbones or chipped teeth slow me down. My God, this woman has me acting like a 15-year-old who's never seen a set of tits before. Shanna either didn't hear or ignored me when I returned. White or red? I lifted a bottle in each hand. She turned around, laughed, and covered her eyes. Red. I didn't know her well enough to decide if she was embarrassed or pretending to be, but at the same time, I felt like I'd known her forever. It's nothing you haven't seen before. Actually, it was dark. I didn't see much. The lights were on in the plane, and I distinctly remember you staring at my cock like it was the biggest lobster in the tank. I wiggled the bottles. It is quite impressive. She laughed again, only this time it came out breathy. And getting more so by the second. We'd been interrupted at the gala. The timing had been off in the limo. Emotions had been too high on the plane. But tonight, nothing stood in the way of us being together. Whatever this was between us felt right. Fun. Easy. An errant thought of the Lazio's demands pricked the back of my mind, but I shoved it away. I'd worry about Nico and her family if and when I had to. Hard as steel, I stood behind her on the deck. Then by all means, take a look. Staring across the pool, she shook her head. I followed her gaze and caught my reflection in the slider. Shanna, are you checking me out in the door? She turned around, stared up my body, and cracked up. I could only imagine the view from her angle, but I'd made her laugh, and that was all that mattered. She covered her face with both hands. You are so bad. And you love every second of it. I dove in over her head. Shanna closed the distance between us and wrapped herself around me. I can't touch. Hold me up. You don't need to make up excuses to touch me. I just saw you swim. Yeah, but I'm drunk, and I'm not that good at it when I'm sober. I slid my arms around her waist. I've got you. She met my eyes and lowered her gaze to my mouth, as if contemplating making the first move. Instead, she tilted her head back and stared at the sky. So many stars. I pressed my lips to her upturned jaw and kissed a slow line to her collarbone. She shivered. Enzo, are you cold? Silly question considering her body heat seeped into my skin. No. A grin tugged at the corners of her mouth as she lowered her gaze. The expression was pure Shanna, sexy and sweet and a little badass. 100% seduction with zero effort. Unable to resist her, I leaned in and nuzzled my cheek against hers. "You didn't drink your wine." "I got distracted." Again with the grin. This woman is killing me. I carried her to the shallow end and clutched the bottle of red. "Open your mouth." "No, I'll choke. Let me have it." She laughed and reached for the wine. Holding it over my head, I turned the request into a command. "Open up." Shauna rolled her eyes and opened her mouth, laughed and opened it again. I held the bottle over her lips and poured a small amount between them. She closed her eyes and swallowed. It was hands down the sexiest thing I've ever seen. I took a drink and motioned to her. Once again, she opened for me and I fed her. Red rivulets ran down her cheek and neck. What could I do but lick the excess from her skin? We took turns, giving and receiving, licking and kissing. I set the bottle on the deck, gripped her waist, and lifted her to the edge of the pool. Standing between her legs, I explored her neck, her breasts, and lower still. Lean back. She tensed as if to refuse, but eased onto her elbows. I tugged her swimsuit down her hips. Lift up. Not here. She nodded toward the security cameras. Are they on? If they are, I'll take care of it. That she'd noticed them surprised me, but I had no intention of discussing anything except her room or mine. I lowered my head and grazed her inner thigh with my teeth. Her hips rose, and I pulled the bikini bottoms off. A knee in each hand, I parted her legs and kissed a line from her calf to her inner thigh. The salt from the pool water only seemed to sweeten her skin. This woman would be the death of me, but I'd die a happy man. Blindly, I grabbed the bottle and poured Merlot onto her belly. Shauna shivered and made a sound that went straight to my cock. The demanding bastard would have to wait. I lapped the wine from her navel, poured more over her smooth mound, and followed the trail as it disappeared between her legs. Her thighs trembled, and her feet flexed against my back, but she remained quiet, except for an occasional gasp. Perhaps it was selfish, but I wanted to hear her lose control. I stood taller, lifting her hips and forcing her to her back. All the while, I circled my tongue over and into her, drawing out her pleasure. Her body grew taut, and she curled her fingers in my hair. Holding and directing me, she struggled to move her hips, but the position made it difficult. When she came, she whimpered and moaned into her arm. The woman held on to control like a drowning man held to a life preserver. I'd wanted her writhing, out of her head in complete abandon. Stop, stop, please stop. She wiggled away. I stood and drew her into the pool. She fell against me as if boneless. Are you all right? I sank into the warm water to rinse the wine from her skin. She nodded against my shoulder. I need a minute. Then I'll do you. Any moron would know what she meant, but I couldn't resist teasing her. Do me? You know what I mean. I'm not sure I do, but you can show me upstairs. I carried her up the pool steps. Wait, I don't have my bathing suit. She squirmed to break free. You don't need it. I eased into the house. What if Hildy comes home? She tried to whisper, but ended up giggling and ruining the effect. She won't. I juggled her and opened the bedroom door. Once inside, I set her on the bed. I'll be right back. You're leaving me? She traced a circle around her breast. Only long enough to find a condom. Her hand trailed down her body. Hurry. I made it to my room in 5 seconds flat, found my wallet, and retrieved the foil packet. On the way back, I stubbed my toe in the bed frame, stumbled, and knocked over a lamp. Once again, the woman had me running around like a maniac. When I returned victorious and horny as hell, Shauna was sound asleep. You've got to be kidding me. I wanted to wake her, but one glance at her peaceful face broke my resolve. Not to mention, she was outright plastered. I might have been a criminal, but I wasn't a monster. The urge to hold her while she slept overwhelmed me. She was a tiny little thing, but so strong. My brothers were right. She deserved respect and time and everything in the world I couldn't give her. But damn if I didn't want to try.
Chapter 17. Shanna. I woke naked, alone, and hungover. Nothing gave me a headache like wine. I groaned and pulled the pillow over my head, but my bladder revolted. Sitting made the room spin. I eased my way to the edge of the bed and stared down at my thighs. A dark purple and red hickey stared back. Lovely. I made it to the bathroom before memories of the night before flashed through my mind. Oh, shit! I passed out on him. I didn't know whether to smile or cringe. I did both. Prior to my wine-induced coma, Enzo had surprised me. He'd blown my socks off the night of the gala, but that thing he'd done with the wine was... Damn. I stepped into the shower and washed the salt out of my hair. The steam helped clear the fog from my brain. I would never call fooling around with Enzo a mistake, but I knew better than to believe in happily ever afters. Our relationship couldn't go anywhere, not with his indecision about the mafia, and not until Evelyn dropped dead. Even then, her ghost would haunt us. I could picture her rattling chains and moaning the rosary every time we had sex. A day or two, and I'll be back to my normal life. What's wrong with a couple nights of mind-blowing sex in a gorgeous house with a gorgeous man? I towel-dried my hair and slipped into a skimpy sundress, sans panties. Come hell or high water, today would be the day the foreplay ended and the banging began. Unless I fell asleep on him again. Midway down the stairs, I stopped and tightened my grip on the banister. One look at Enzo and Hildy's worried expressions, and my pulse raced. He waited until I reached the first floor before drawing me into an embrace. What happened? What's wrong? Maggie and Gabe? Is everyone all right? I pulled back, but he avoided my gaze. Everyone's fine, Shanna. His frown deepened. Tell me. My alcohol-shrunken brain played through every horrific scenario imaginable. I answered your phone this morning. You what? I never pegged him for the kind of man who'd invade my privacy, but I had the feeling I had bigger problems. It rang several times from the same number. And? It was your neighbor. Your building was set on fire. Your apartment and the shop below were destroyed. Mr. Bouguer! My knees threatened to buckle, but he caught me before I hit the floor. What? No, her name was Ann Dixon. Enzo furrowed his brow and glanced at Hildy. The older woman cocked her head. Who is Mr. Bouguer? My cat. Did Anne mention my cat? She glanced at Enzo as if he'd know, or maybe her wide-eyed stare was a cry for help. He shook his head. No, but cats are intelligent. I'm sure he got out. Not him. He's not very smart, and he's too fat to fit through small places. I bent at the waist and focused on my breathing. In, out. In, out. He rested his hand between my shoulder blades. Let's call her. No, screw that. I need to go over there. I stood so abruptly the back of my head collided with his jaw. Rubbing his face, Enzo said, You can't. What do you mean I can't? Hildy moved to my side. Shanna, I know this is difficult, but it's better if you stay inside the house for the time being. Why don't we call Ms. Dixon and have her look for him? My heart raced and my chest tightened and spots danced before my eyes. I was either having a heart attack or a panic attack, maybe both. Unable to think straight, I nodded and allowed Hildy to guide me to the couch. Did the entire building go up? Was anyone hurt? Ms. Dixon is 80-some-odd years old. Is she homeless now? Oh, God. I'm homeless. No one was hurt, and Ms. Dixon didn't mention being displaced. It seems the fire was contained to your apartment and the store below it. Hildy sat beside me and rubbed my back. Her gentle touch took the edge off my hysteria. I could totally see this woman raising 6 boys. Enzo pulled his phone from his pocket and dialed. Ms. Dixon, this is Enzo Marchionni. Shanna is asking about her cat, Mr. Booger.
Mr. Bouguer, Hildy corrected him.
He listened for the longest moment in the history of long freaking moments. I see. Okay. Will you do me a favor? Contact the animal shelters and speak to the neighbors.
Leaning forward, I hugged myself. This can't be happening.
Hildy pulled me closer. Yes, I'm her boyfriend.
He sat on the other side of me and rested his hand on my thigh.
Boyfriend? I bristled until it dawned on me that he'd likely used the word to get some street cred with Ms. Dixon. Posters would be fantastic. A reward? He met my gaze. Shaking my head, I mouthed, No. Yes, good idea.
I rocked myself back and forth. My poor Mr. Bouguer had either burned alive or was running the streets, scared and alone.
Enzo went quiet as Ms. Dixon's voice filled the line. 10,000.
Is he nuts?
I bolted upright.
Too much. That's too much.
He held up his hand. Do you have a photo of Mr. Boog? Do you have a photo of the cat? I stood and paced the room. I had neighbors on either side, and the walls weren't exactly thick.
How is it possible an empty apartment suddenly caught fire?
Good. No, don't put this number on the flyer. Would you mind using yours? I will compensate you. No, I won't hear of it. It's for your trouble.
He nodded.
Thank you. Yes, you have a good day too. I rounded on him. Are you crazy? $10,000 will bring out every nutball in New Orleans. You wanted to find the cat.
He stared as if he thought I might shatter at any second. I'm so screwed. Everything I own was in that apartment. Did she say if anything was salvageable?
He stood and wrapped his arms around me. Don't worry about that now. Things can be replaced.
Mr. Bouguer can't be replaced.
He cupped my face in his hands. No, but if he made it out, someone will find him. Honey, Enzo's right. Don't give up hope.
Hildy hovered nearby. I have nothing left. No job, no house, no clothes. What am I going to do?
Between his strong arms and her kind voice, I couldn't hold back my emotions. A dam broke inside me, and all I could do was ride the raging water until things settled. If things settled. You're staying with me until we get to the bottom of the fires. He sighed. Sweetheart, do you have insurance?
Insurance? Oh, God. Mom's going to flip out. My mother owns the building, but I pay rent.
I would assume she carries insurance.
Yes, but I let my renter's policy lapse. My stuff isn't covered. My thoughts raced too fast to bother trying to figure out my next step.
Instead, I focused on something easier. Anger.
Did Nico's family do this?
It's a possibility. His shoulders tensed. Shanna, there's more. I don't believe in coincidences. I pulled away from him. That bitch killed my cat. It's best not to jump to conclusions. Hildy might have spoken to me, but her gaze never left Enzo. I knew the look. Evelyn had worn it a few times in Sicily. It was a warning and a command to control the situation. To control his woman. Please, what are the chances I'd lose my job and my apartment in the span of a couple of days? Has anyone confronted them? Does Gabe know what happened? I couldn't sit in a white marble cage while some lunatic mob family systematically ruined my life. I headed for the stairs. Where are you going? Enzo followed me. The quarter. I need to see my apartment for myself and look for Mr. Bouguer. Then I'm going to pay Alex a visit. I'm not leaving the office until he tells me why he fired me. Enzo caught up with me at the top of the stairs. Shanna, come back down and have some breakfast. There's more I need to tell you. Then we'll call Gabe and see what we can find out.
Why are you so calm? My entire fucking life exploded the second I met you.
As soon as the words came out of my mouth, I regretted them.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean... I don't blame you for any of this.
He wore the same dipped chin, sad-eyed expression as the boy in the family photos. I wouldn't blame you if you did.
I know this isn't your fault. I shouldn't have said that. I'm sorry, but I can't sit around and wait.
While I appreciated his hospitality, I needed to get back to the quarter, find my cat, and see if I could salvage any of my things, including my job. His fingers bit into my upper arms. You can't leave until we know it's safe. Wanna bet? Please, come downstairs. You need to hear the rest before you make any decisions. I nodded and followed him. Enzo waited until we entered the kitchen before answering. There was a break-in at the restaurant last night, and a small fire. I gripped the countertop.
Another fire? What the hell is wrong with these people? How bad is it?
They trashed the place. It'll take a couple of weeks to get it up and running again. He stared as if waiting for me to react. All things considered, trashed struck me as an odd way to describe someone torching his restaurant. Was the fire damage extensive? No. He pressed his lips into a tight line and shook his head. The intruder lit paper products and cooking oil in a large stock pot. The air left my lungs as if he'd struck me. That feels like a message. I agree. Enzo folded his arms. I didn't want to get into this in front of Hildy, but I fear you were right. This has the Lazios written all over it. They were careful not to destroy anything too large or difficult to replace. Snap! A piece of the puzzle fell into place. But they wanted you to know they were responsible for my apartment. He nodded. We shouldn't jump to conclusions yet, but it makes sense. The Lazios wouldn't want me out of business for long. It'd cost them too much money.
Shit.
While the Lazios were my first suspects, confirmation a mafia family had me in their crosshairs left me more than a little freaked out. We're going to lie low for a while. Stay out of sight. Security is good here, but I'm adding some extra men to keep an eye on things in the evenings. Enzo walked farther into the kitchen. I wanted to point out he didn't own me, to tell him I could take care of myself, to insist nothing would happen to me in broad daylight in the middle of the French Quarter. But after the events of the previous days, a little caution would go a long way. However, that didn't mean I intended to let him boss me around, nor did I want him along for the ride. I need to go alone. I could blend into a crowd, but Enzo Marchionni would stand out like a billboard in Times Square. Do you need anything from the store? Hildy's going to Rouse's to pick up a few groceries. I opened my mouth to tell him no thank you, but bit my tongue. The longer the housekeeper was out, the easier it'd be for me to slip away. If it's not too much trouble, could she stop by Target? I could use some shorts, size 4. I didn't pack any for Sicily, because Italians don't wear them. I'm not sure about your choice in stores, but I'll add shorts to her list. He typed a message into his cell, tossed it aside, and brandished a spatula. What sounds good, omelets or French toast? You're cooking? The mere thought of food made me queasy. Yes, I do, or did, run a restaurant. I love to cook. He cracked a smile, but it seemed forced. Surprise me. I needed a plan besides eat, make up an excuse to go upstairs, and slip out the back. Call your former boss while I whip something up. He pulled my cell from his pocket and set it on the table. Good idea. Though I had no clue what I'd say to him, I dialed Alex's number. Enzo removed a large skillet from the wire rack and heated it while he pulled various containers from the fridge. He lifted the pan and artistically swirled olive oil onto the hot surface. The call went to voicemail. "Hi, Alex. This is Shanna. I need to speak to you. It's urgent." "Keep trying him," Enzo spoke as he chopped veggies. Temporarily distracted, I moved from the table to the kitchen island. "You weren't kidding. You do know what you're doing. I studied culinary arts at Johnson & Wales right out of high school. I wanted to be a chef since I was old enough to sit on a stool and watch Hildy cook." "That's really cool. I can hardly boil water." I rested my chin in my hand. "I could teach you the basics." "I'm hopeless. That's why God invented takeout." I hated small talk on a good day, and this was far from a good day. "How are you so calm? How can you shut it off and pretend everything is okay?" He tossed the veggies into the pan and whisked the eggs. "Given your line of work, you should know revenge is a dish best served cold." The tone of his voice and the set of his jaw made me thank my lucky stars my last name wasn't Lazio.
Chapter 18. Enzo. Watching Shanna eat the food I'd prepared topped my list of sexy, non-sexual moments. Between the appreciative sound she made, the way her eyes drifted closed, and the fork disappearing in her sinful mouth, I needed a cold shower. Better yet, I needed to bend her over the kitchen island and sink inside her. That was incredible. Shanna sat back and flashed me a satisfied smile. We had pressing matters to attend to, but my mind remained firmly entrenched in imagining 101 things I could do to her with a spatula. "Glad you liked it. Are you going to call Gabe now?" The question snapped me back to the matter at hand better than a bucket of ice water. "Yes, and you should listen in." She stood and stretched her arms over her head. "I'll go upstairs and shower to give you some privacy." That's odd. I thought she'd appreciate me allowing her to eavesdrop. "This affects you as much as it does me. You should hear what he has to say." Shanna frowned and stared at her hands. When she finally got around to replying, her voice shook as if she might cry. "I know, but you need to focus on what he's saying. I'll only distract you by breaking down or losing my temper." I lifted a lock of her damp hair. "You showered before you came down for breakfast." "I wasn't aware we were under water rations." She waved her hands, motioning to the room. "What's the point in having all of this if you can't have a shower and a soak in the gigantic tub on the same day?" For a split second, she reminded me of Nico throwing a tantrum, but Shanna had good reason for her emotional outburst. "Pamper yourself however you see fit." "Thank you, Your Highness." Her snark didn't surprise me. I'd come to understand she used sarcasm when upset. "I'll come find you when I'm finished." I reached for her, but she glared and sidestepped my advances. "No, don't." Shanna wrapped her arms around her middle. "I need some time alone to process everything. If you touch me, I'll fall apart." "I understand." It killed me to let her walk away, but pushing the issue would get me nowhere. I went into my father's office and called Gabe. "Enzo, how are you holding up?" His voice had a gravelly quality that told me he hadn't slept much. "As well as can be expected." "How's Shanna?" "Shaken up." I dragged my hand down my face. "But I think she's more upset about the cat than she is about her apartment." "Women love their animals." He half chuckled. "She's tough. If I know Shanna, she won't rest until she finds out who did this and why. I bet she's already researching recent arson cases and requesting international passenger lists." Fuck me, he's probably right. Should I keep her off the computer? It's not a bad idea. She's got friends in the police department. The last thing we need is more cops snooping around. I'd told her more than I should have about the family business, but I kept that little tidbit to myself. Gabe had enough on his plate without worrying about Shanna inadvertently tipping off the authorities. "Did you get the meeting with Lazio?" "Pietro Lazio denies any involvement in the fire at Shanna's or your restaurant. He swore none of his people are in New Orleans." "Do you believe him?" "I do, but one of the sons could have done this." Gabe sighed. "The fire marshal is going to rule the fire at Shanna's place arson. It's only a matter of time before the press links her to you or Maggie." My stomach tightened. We're planning to lie low here until the shitstorm passes. Good. Lock the place down. His voice came through muffled, as if he covered the receiver to speak to someone else. I need to go help Max. I had too many unanswered questions to let him off the phone. What about the Abruzzos? I'm putting Leo on the line. I ground my teeth to keep from laying into him. It was bad enough Gabe sent me back to the States, but to freeze me out now, I had a right to know what the fuck was going on. Hey, bro. Leo sounded like he just rolled out of bed. I drew a breath and swallowed my anger. Did Gabe speak to Tommaso Abruzzo? Yeah, son of a bitch is out of the country until Wednesday. He said we could meet with little Tommy. That'd be a waste of time. Tommy can't take a shit without his old man's permission. Are they stalling to piss us off? Leo said, I'm not convinced Tommaso Abruzzo knows what's going on. This feels more personal. Your restaurant? Yeah, that makes sense. We asked to break ties, they don't want to, so they busted up to make a point, but why bring Shanna into it? I agree. All signs point to the Lazio family. Maybe that warning shot wasn't for you. Would Nicolina order something like this? The question sent a chill down my spine. I'd asked myself the same thing, but dismissed it. The timing was off. The shot had been fired before I'd thrown her out of the house. Leo's voice rose. You still there? Nico's a spoiled brat, but I can't see her ordering burning someone's house down or shooting at me and Shanna. Plus, she would have to know that she'd be the first person we suspected. She's a lot of things, but stupid isn't one of them. Are you sure? He cleared his throat. She took an instant disliking to Shanna, and let's not forget Pietro's demand for a Marchionni-Lazio wedding. I know, but it doesn't sit right. I drew a breath. Nico saw Shanna and me together at the gala. If she wanted to hurt her, why wait until now? Maybe Nico didn't think she was a threat until she saw you two together again. Trust me, Nico viewed Shanna as the competition months ago. What makes you say that? Of course, I'd have to spell it out for Leo. She saw us together. Damn, bro, you and Shanna? He laughed. I thought you said you couldn't seal the deal. We had a good time. Things were going well until I got squirrely and cut her loose. Then you realized the error of your ways. No wonder you were tripping over yourself when she arrived in Sicily. Why does everyone keep saying that? I needed to apologize for being an ass after the gala. And to tell her you weren't with Nicolina? Something like that. Leo sighed. Look, man, I get it. Shauna's an awesome catch, but she's smart. Be careful what you tell her. Eventually, she's going to start asking the wrong questions. You need a game plan. Thank you, Captain Obvious. I have it handled. No problem, nearsighted boy, he chuckled. I hung my head. I told Shanna too much about the family business. I'd fooled myself into believing she could handle it. Hell, she had handled it until someone had torched her apartment. It always came down to this. Women asked questions that were best left unanswered. When I dodged or fed them a fairy tale, they accused me of holding back. When I did answer, they panicked and ran. If there was a silver lining to marrying Nico, it was never having to lie about the business. She understood, with no explanations necessary. I cleared my throat and all thoughts of Nico. What about Dahlia? How do you manage her? We've established a don't ask, don't tell policy. She knows, but she doesn't know. Capisci? Capisco. In hindsight, I should have done the same with Shanna, but that ship had sailed. I wanted her to know. I wanted her to know and to understand. What's more, I wanted her to accept me, and for better or for worse, the family business came with the package. Leo said, It's best you don't leave the house. If you have to go to the restaurant, you'll need security. How many guys do you have on site? None during the day. 2 on the premises for overnights. Get 4 on around the clock. This place is harder to break into than the Federal Reserve. Regardless of who's behind the attacks, all 4 families want business as usual. They don't give 2 shits about changes in the laws or issues with Homeland. And they're not listening to what Pops and Gabe have told them. I think things will get worse before they get better. I agree. I stood and paced the office. Then get more security. Leo lowered his voice. Gabe needs out. He has a family now. I'll step in. Sell Gabe the bar and you the restaurants. You guys can make them legit, and let me handle the Sicilian problems. The words fell out of my mouth out of habit, but for the first time I didn't mean them. I didn't want any of it. Maybe Shauna's right. Maybe there's a way to take care of the people on Comiso that doesn't involve the mafia. We're keeping the properties in Louisiana, letting the rest go, and we're all getting out. He sucked in a breath. Marco's handling the legalities of your rebuild. No fucking way. I'll handle my business. My voice rose. Hey, don't shoot the messenger. Gabe made the call. They pushed me out of Sicily. Now they're pushing me out of my restaurant? Something snapped, be it the last straw or my sanity. This is complete bullshit. I've run that place since day one. I built it from the ground up. Calm down. It's not as bad as it sounds. How can I calm down when I'm not allowed to handle my own fucking restaurant? Pull your head out of your ass and listen. Marco's role is strictly to deal with the authorities and insurance company. Leo hesitated. Enzo, this isn't a competition. Gabe's trying to do what's best for all of us. I get it, but what's good for you two may not be good for me. I disconnected the call. I needed to cool the fuck off and speak with someone who didn't have their head up their ass. I needed Shanna. I made my way upstairs and knocked on her door. No answer. Shanna? I turned the knob, but the damn thing was locked. Knocking harder, I shouted, Shanna, it's me. Open the door. Where the hell is she? I ran my hand over the top of the door jamb, retrieved the key, and unlocked the door. I'd never been so damned happy to see a suitcase in my life. She didn't leave for good. I checked my room, the bath, and the rest of the second floor. No sign of her. Dialing her number, I took the steps 2 at a time and swept the ground level. When she didn't answer, I hit redial and strode to the pool deck. Where the hell is she? I hit redial again. Hello? I could barely hear her voice over the telltale sound of the streetcar. A lethal recipe of anger, fear, and frustration, with a sprinkle of relief, bubbled inside me. Tell me where you are. I'm sending security to get you. I have to run some errands. I'll be back in a couple of hours. Sweetheart, listen to me. I spoke to Gabe. It's not safe for either of us to be on the streets. I need you to tell me where you are. Shanna went quiet. Come back and tell me why you lied to me. My grip tightened until the phone case cracked. The fact she deceived me hurt. However, the realization that I was completely and unequivocally in love with her hit me like a bullet to the heart. Please. I'm sorry. I'll be careful. She hung up.
Chapter 19. Shanna. The Garden District, arguably the prettiest part of New Orleans, passed outside the streetcar window, but I stared at my phone. Maggie had called 3 times, and Enzo had machine gun fired my cell with voice and text messages, each one angrier than the last. I couldn't blame him. I had lied to him and snuck out of the house. Although my reasons had seemed sound at the time, in the grand scheme of things, they were foolish. His last text made my stomach churn. The shots fired in Ragusa might have been for you. Please come back. I pulled my ball cap down over my face and slid on my sunglasses. They were a piss-poor disguise, but they were all I had with me. My job forced me to deal with shady people, doing shadier things in the shadiest parts of town. However, in the 2 years I worked with Alex, I'd never been this unnerved. Rather than heading straight to my apartment, and possibly into danger, I exited the streetcar on Canal. The busy area provided the cover I needed. Following close behind a group of tourists, I crossed into the French Quarter on Royal. By the time I reached Landry & Sons Antiques, my fight-or-flight response had kicked into overdrive. I ducked into the back room, pressed my hand to my chest, and fought to catch my breath. Shanna? Jack emerged from his office. I'd never been so happy to see my oldest friend. Everything from his rumpled hair to his 50s-style black and white dress shoes was familiar, comforting, safe. He took one look at me and pulled me against his chest. Honey, I'm so sorry about your apartment. Have you been there? As much as I wanted to be held, I didn't have time for a full-scale breakdown. I pulled away and took a step back to prevent him from hugging me again.
He closed the distance I'd placed between us and gripped my upper arms. Staring until I met his eyes, Jack said, "No, I was on the phone with Maggie when you came in. She's worried about you." Enzo must have called her. "You didn't tell her I was here, did you?" Never in my wildest dreams would I have thought I'd see my best friend as the opposition. "I did." Frowning, he guided me into a chair. "What's going on?" Somehow, I didn't think Jack would believe me if I told him the Sicilian mafia might have ordered a hit on me, killed my cat, and burned down my apartment. I had to get a grip and come up with a plausible story before he had me committed. "I can't get into the details." "Since when?" He narrowed his eyes. "Since Enzo Marchionni." "It's about a case I'm working on." His expression softened a hair. "Go on." I can't." My lack of judicial creativity bothered me more than my sudden distrust of Maggie. I'd always been able to bullshit with the best of them. It came with the job. The fact I had absolutely nothing to say told me how much the situation had freaked me out. I never should have left the mansion. "Are you in danger?" "Maybe." Jack stood, paced away, and marched back. "What does this have to do with Maggie and the Marchionnis?" I shook my head. "Damn it, Shanna!" He folded and unfolded his arms. "Do you need to get out of town?" I couldn't handle my nerves, let alone his. "Jack, please sit down. You're making me nuts." "I'm making you nuts?" He barked out a laugh. "That's rich." "In the last few days, Alex fired me for no reason. My apartment was torched. Someone fired a gun over my head. Mr. Bouguer is missing." His eyes widened. "Mr. Bouguer was in the apartment?" Out of everything I'd said, he'd focused on my cat, and I loved him for it. "Ms. Dixon was going in a couple of times a day to feed him and keep him company. She hasn't seen him since the fire." Jack walked behind the counter and pulled out a set of keys that would make a medieval jailer jealous. "You remember my old hunting cabin down in Terrebonne Parish?" "Vaguely." Hunting cabins everywhere would take offense to him using their name to describe the old shack on stilts. How the place had survived a thunderstorm, let alone a handful of hurricanes, was anyone's guess. But I suspected it was held together with duct tape and superglue. He handed me 2 keys. "One's to the cabin, the other is to my boat at the marina. I'll call and let the guys know you're coming down. Ask for Otis. He'll give you directions." While I appreciated the offer, May in the bayou meant nothing but gators, copperheads, and water moccasins. I think I'll take my chances with the mafia. "Thanks, but I can't." "You can, and you will." He grabbed my wrist, turned it over, and set the keys in my palm. "I'll stay here and look for Mr. Bouguer. See what I can save from your place, and meet you in a couple of days." "I can't ask you to do that for me." I needed to get back to the mansion before Enzo ordered the mob version of the Secret Service to drag me out of the shop. No way on earth could I explain that to Jack. "You didn't ask. I offered." Brow furrowed, he stared as if trying to solve a jigsaw puzzle. "Don't be stupid, Shanna. Someone shot at you." "I'm not being stupid." Okay, I am being stupid, but I'm not going to let him fall down the rabbit hole with me. "I have a place to hide out." Jack narrowed his eyes. "Where?" "It's best you don't know the details." I had no idea why I evaded his question, but I didn't want to tell him I'd shacked up with Enzo Marchionni. "I have my cell. Call me if—" "Screw that." He grabbed my upper arms again. I thought he might try to shake some sense into me. Instead, he laid one hell of a kiss on me. Dumbstruck, I stood there unable to think or move. If Jack noticed my lack of response, it didn't bother him. The man I'd considered a dear friend for years plundered my mouth like a freaking pirate searching for buried treasure. The situation shocked me, but it wasn't entirely awful.
As far as kisses went, Jack delivered a solid performance. But my heart wasn't in it. Enzo had ruined me. I planted my hands on his broad chest and pushed him away. "Jack, stop." He wobbled and grinned like a drunk. "You have no idea how long I've wanted to do that." My brain misfired. A million questions pinged around in my skull, but I only managed one word. "Why?" He cupped my face in his hands. "Shanna Isaac, I've been in love." "Don't!" I jerked free. "Don't you dare say it. You've been pushing me to date for months. You're the one who told me to cozy up to one of the Marchionnis." He flinched as if I'd struck him. "Is that what this is about?" This can't be happening. I folded my arms, bowed my head, and nodded. Jack lifted my chin. "Are you happy?" Am I? I hadn't stopped to think about it. In fact, I'd spent most of my time with Enzo wondering when the other $5,000 Italian leather loafer would fall. A week ago, I would have considered seeing where things went with Jack. But now? The thought of dating anyone except Enzo made me queasy. Shit. I plopped into the chair. Shit. He knelt in front of me. "What's going on in that head of yours?" "I'm in love with Enzo Marchionni." I stared into Jack's dark chocolate eyes and wished, more than anything, I could tell him the truth. "I don't want this to mess up our friendship." He offered me a smile, but I knew him well enough to know I'd broken his heart. "I'd ask which part, but it doesn't matter. Nothing can ruin our friendship, Shanna. Nothing." I threw my arms around him and buried my face in his chest. "Thank you." Holding me close, Jack said, "I meant what I said. I love you." I opened my mouth to tell him I loved him too, as a friend, but I never got the chance. Enzo Marchionni rounded the corner and folded his arms. I sat frozen like a mouse before a snake. In fact, his eyes held the same amount of warmth as the reptile. "Shanna, you didn't tell me you were seeing someone." Jack rose to his full height, a couple inches taller than Enzo. However, if I had to place bets on the winner of a cage match, I'd have bet my last dime on the Italian. Muscle didn't stand much of a chance against rage. I shot to my feet and insinuated myself between the men. He's a friend," Jack spoke without ending the staring match with Enzo. The testosterone levels in the room choked off the oxygen. If I didn't do something quick, I feared we'd all suffocate. I rested my hand on Enzo's arm. "He's going to look for my cat and see if anything's salvageable at the apartment." His ice-cold gaze fell to my lips. My hand flew to my mouth before I thought the better of it. I could still taste Jack and feel the whisker burn on my cheeks. Enzo motioned to the exit. "I have a car waiting. Shall we?" Jack balled his hands at his sides. I needed to speak to him before I left, but I had absolutely no idea what to say to smooth things over. "Go ahead. I'll be right out." Enzo shot me a warning look, turned, and walked out of the store. "That's the guy you're seeing?" Jack pointed after him. "That arrogant son of a bitch?" I grabbed his arm and pulled him out of view of the front windows. "He's not like that when you get to know him. Cut him some slack. Imagine what it looked like when he walked in here." "I know what it looked like, and I know you were scared. No, terrified of him." "Not of him, of the two of you going at it. Can you blame me?" I wanted to throw my head back and scream out my frustration, but that'd undoubtedly bring the Marchionni security team in with guns blazing. "You acted like a couple of Rottweilers marking your territory. I thought you'd slug it out before I could separate you." He nodded to the door. "You'd best not keep him waiting."
Chapter 20. Enzo. The warm, humid air wrapped around me like a wet blanket as I stood outside the car. I drew a deep breath and allowed the musky scent of the Mississippi River, the odor of garbage, and the savory aroma of Old Bay seasoning comfort me. The thought of moving to Sicily and running the show was alluring, but I knew I would never do it. The French Quarter was home. Shanna emerged from the antique store like a hurricane making landfall. The only thing on the planet that put Mother Nature to shame was the unbridled fury of a woman. She set her gaze on me and frowned. "You had no right." I opened the back door of the town car and waited for her to climb inside. Shanna glanced up Royal Street, as if gauging the distance she'd have to run to be free of me. Too far to go on foot. I'd follow her to the ends of the earth if it meant keeping her safe. But I knew better than to tell her that. The woman would see it as a challenge. She huffed and slid into the back seat. "You have nothing to say for yourself?" I sat beside her and spoke to the driver. "Take us to the 600 block of Dauphine. Drive slow, but don't stop." "We're driving past my apartment." Her voice dulled. "I thought you'd want to see it for yourself. Unless, of course, you've already been there." The thought of her roaming the streets alone made me grind my teeth. Not only had she lied to me, she'd needlessly put herself in danger. "I came straight to Jack's." Jack. Hearing her say his name did nothing to improve my mood. "I don't appreciate you leaving without telling me." "I shouldn't have snuck out, but I knew you'd say no if I asked to come into the quarter." "For good reason." I said louder than I'd intended. "What did you mean when you said the—" She glanced at the driver and frowned. "When you said I was the target in Ragusa." I respected the fact she'd censored herself in mixed company. If nothing else, she had a good head on her shoulders. "Everything that's happened seems personal." "My money's on Nico." "It's looking that way, yes." I lowered my voice. "Which is why I panicked when you left." "I'm not some helpless damsel in distress, nor am I your captive." "I understand that, but—" "But nothing. I agreed to stay with you until things settle, and I'll inform you before I leave the house, but I won't ask your permission. You don't have the right to tell me where I can and cannot go." I disagreed, but bit my tongue. If I pushed her, she'd bolt like a dog on a broken leash. As we neared her block, Shanna shifted in her seat and pressed closer to the window. The city had set out safety barricades and yellow tape in an effort to keep criminals and curious tourists away from the damaged building. The exterior wall facing west had partially crumbled. Blackened beams were all that remained of what had probably been her living room. Continuing to stare, she sat as still as the grave. Even after we'd passed her former home, she didn't move a muscle. "Shanna," I touched her arm. "There's no way Mr. Bouguer got out of there." Her voice cracked. I pointed to a poster glued to a street lamp. "Look, there's one of the flyers Mrs. Dixon put up. Someone will find him." She didn't as much as turn her head. "Or the fire department will find his remains." I'm sure they would have by now. I had no idea how arson investigations worked, but it didn't look like a very large space. Surely the fire department had combed through it looking for victims. "Not if it isn't safe. You saw it. Do you really think the floor is stable?" Her voice rose in volume and pitch. I sandwiched her hand between mine. "Have you spoken to the authorities?" "They wouldn't give me any information over the phone." She pulled away. "Which is why I wanted to come and see it for myself." I leaned forward to get the driver's attention. "Take us to the firehouse in Decatur." Shanna stared. "I'm allowed to speak to firefighters? You know most of them are men, right?" I'd planned on having this conversation once we were alone, but it appeared she wanted to go at it in front of witnesses. "Are you going to kiss them?" She folded her arms. "Do you anticipate embracing any random firemen while they tell you they love you?" "No." I held my palms up. "Great. Then I fail to see a problem." "How magnanimous of you." She smirked and glanced out the window. "You had it wrong back there. Jack and I are friends." "Friends?" I rolled my lips in and nodded. "With benefits?" "No, just friends." My patience stretched to its limits. I could handle whatever had happened between them. We weren't exclusive. We didn't have a commitment. Hell, I hadn't gotten around to taking her out to dinner. However, I would not tolerate dishonesty. "Don't lie to me." "I'm not." Her cheeks flushed, but I doubted I'd embarrassed her. You kissed him. I pointed at her, but curled my hand and folded my arms. Not that it's any of your business, but he kissed me. She sighed. I didn't know what to do or how to react. I've always looked at him like a big brother. I'll tell you how you should have reacted. You should have pushed the bastard away. I needed to calm the fuck down before I said something we'd both regret. You didn't know, did you? And before you answer, remember, I know how your mouth looks after you've been ravished. She drew a deep breath. No, I didn't push him away. Her answer hit me like gasoline on a wildfire. Do you love him? Shanna whipped her head in my direction. Mouth open, eyes wide, she stared for 2 heartbeats. Jack and I are friends. Or so I thought. Before I could form a reply, the car stopped in front of the fire station. She jumped out before the driver put the car in park. Do you want me to go in with you? So much for holding back my anger. I wanted nothing more than to dry her eyes and hold her, but my damned pride wouldn't allow it. No. And by the way, no one uses the word ravished anymore. Shanna slammed the door in my face and marched inside. I counted to 10 and then to 50 before exiting the car. Shanna stood inside the firehouse, speaking to a middle-aged woman in normal business attire. Not exactly what I'd expected. The lady glanced at me and nodded before turning her attention back to Shanna. I know this is difficult, but we can't allow you to go into the building until we know it's safe. What about the other residents? Was anyone else displaced? She hugged herself as if trying to keep from falling apart. I'm worried about my next-door neighbor, Ann Dixon. Sooner or later, the emotions would catch up with her, and I planned to be the one to hold her when they did. The Red Cross placed Mrs. Dixon in a hotel while her apartment is being repaired. The news tightened my chest. I'd spoken to the woman on the phone. She'd never once mentioned the fire had impacted her. Instead, the elderly woman had focused on Shauna's well-being and the cat. I moved to Shauna's side. I have her number in my cell. We'll pay her a visit before we head home. I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name. Beth Hall, according to her name tag, looked me over twice. Enzo Marchionni. I extended my hand. Did any of the firefighters on the scene mention seeing a cat? Ms. Hall gave me a wide smile and a weak handshake. As I was telling Miss Isaac, no animals were rescued from the fire, but I'd be happy to contact the men on duty and ask. I'd appreciate it. I stared until she got the hint and picked up the phone. Shanna inched closer to me. She didn't offer to call when I asked. I whispered. I suspect it would have been the other way around if you'd spoken to a man. I doubt it. She pressed her tiny form against my side. I held her for what seemed like hours while Ms. Hall did her thing. Despite our close proximity, an uncomfortable silence hung in the air between us. I apologized for losing my temper in the car. She sighed and eased away. I can't talk about this right now. I understand. I didn't understand. In fact, I wanted the entire argument behind us as quickly and as efficiently as possible.
Chapter 21. Shanna. The Marchionni mansion glittered and gleamed the same as it had when I'd left. But for me, it had lost its luster. The front rooms had a museum-quality coldness to them that set me on edge. The kitchen felt as empty as a set for a fancy cooking show. Even the massive man cave seemed suffocating. Enzo hadn't said much since we'd left the firehouse. Not like I had anything to say to him anyway. With no new information about Mr. Bougere, my already cracked heart had splintered a little more. I'd hoped a visit with Ms. Dixon would brighten my mood, but she hadn't answered when I called. I pulled my phone from my pocket and dialed my mom. I had no intention of getting into my personal life, but I'd put off telling her about the building long enough. Shoshana, I was just about to call you. My mother sounded out of breath. Are you still in Sicily? Honey, I have bad news about the building. I could count the times I'd lied to her on one hand, but I couldn't tell her the truth. If she knew I'd returned, she'd likely ask me to be her eyes on the ground with all things fire. At the same time, Ms. Dixon and the business manager at the fire station knew I was back. It was only a matter of time before my mom discovered the truth. "Shoshana, are you still there?" She muttered something about international calls. The familiarity of her voice anchored me enough that my thoughts cleared. "I'm here. Mom, I only have a minute. I know about the fire. Ms. Dixon called me. Are you insured?" Yes. Don't worry about the building." She quieted for a moment. When she spoke again, she used her mom voice. "But it doesn't cover personal belongings. You were behind on your rent. Please tell me you kept up with your renter's policy." I closed my eyes and bit back a groan. So much for a little maternal nurturing. "I'm good, Mom, but I need to go. Have fun and send loads of pictures. Give Maggie a hug and kiss from me." I disconnected the call. Unable to sit still and too tired to start my job search, I debated going for a swim. Only when I walked outside, the pool deck reminded me of Enzo and that damned wine. Not happening. I poked my head into the library and found him reading a gigantic book. It made 0 sense, but him sitting there so at ease riled my temper. He glanced up and gave me a half-assed smile. "Would you like to join me?" "I'm dyslexic." The words fell from my mouth before I could stop them. He set the novel on the table beside him. "My mother has a collection of audiobooks. What do you like to read?" "I don't like to read anything. Did you miss the part where I said I was dyslexic?" Enzo gave me a nervous smile that told me he had no clue what to say. I held my hand up. I didn't have the energy to explain my learning disability, nor did I feel comfy cozy enough to make myself more vulnerable to him. "Forget it. I think I'll go take a bubble bath." He arched a brow. "Is that code for sneaking out the back door?" I gave him my best dirty look, turned on my heel, and marched upstairs. What was I thinking? Coming back here? The keys Jack had given me weighed a few ounces, but they felt heavy in my pocket. I could leave. Enzo would never find me down in Terrebonne Parish. Heck, I wasn't sure I could find my way to the marina without asking Jack for directions. Life would be so easy with a man like Jackson Landry. For one thing, he'd stuck with me for years. We'd met at a football game, him rooting for the Saints, and me wearing my Miami Dolphins jersey. Since that day, he'd been my shoulder to cry on, +1 when I needed a date, and my personal handyman. He'd seen me at my best and my absolute worst. I doubted he'd leave me even if the relationship grew stale. Is that what I want? Stale? Familiar? Safe? Comfortable like an old pair of sweats? There are worse things than sharing your life with your best friend. I stripped out of my clothes and wrapped a fluffy white towel around myself while I filled the tub. I couldn't lie to Jack and pretend I felt the same way about him. It wouldn't be fair to either of us. Not when I was in love with Enzo. Leave it to me to choose the roller coaster over the merry-go-round. I went back into my room for a change of clothes and found Enzo sitting in the chair beside my window. I clutched the towel tighter to my chest. "I thought you said I would have privacy in this room." He stood and walked to me. "I was upset with Gabe and Leo this morning. I wasn't thinking straight, and then when I saw you with Jack, I was jealous. I took my frustrations out on you. I'm sorry." "Forget it." I turned my back to him to eliminate the temptation to touch him. "Go take a bath. I'll make dinner." He massaged my shoulders. The warmth of his hands spread through me and thawed my anger. "I'm not hungry." I closed my eyes and hung my head. As much as I wanted to be alone, his fingers were like magic. "You're so tense. Why don't you lie down and let me work the knots out?" A massage is the oldest trick in the book for getting a woman to sleep with you. "Because it works." He chuckled, continuing to rub the tension from my neck and shoulders. Let's go to bed.
I'm still pissed at you.
Angry sex is good sex.
He kissed the back of my neck, and I'm not talking about a peck or brush of lips. Enzo Marchionni nuzzled and licked and nibbled until I turned into a puddle of need. Is that right? I breathed the words on a sigh. Turning me to face him, he ripped the towel away and yanked me against his chest. Part of me wanted to slap his smug face, but the other part needed the distraction from my mess of a life. I pulled the hem of his shirt up. Enzo reached over his shoulder, tugged his t-shirt over his head, and threw it to the side.
You don't believe me?
I'll need some proof. I raised on tiptoes.
That can be arranged.
He slanted his mouth over mine and kissed me like a man staking his claim. Fearing my legs wouldn't hold me, I wrapped my arms around his waist and ran my nails up his back. Each time he stepped forward, I stepped back, until we reached the bed. We'd come so close, so many times. I'd had 2 months of foreplay to prepare for this, but my hands still trembled when I touched him. What if this changes things? What if I fall for him even more? What if he leaves? Enzo whispered,
Shanna.
Pushing the thoughts from my mind, I sucked his lower lip between my teeth and bit until he hissed. He pushed forward, but I wanted control this time. He'd called the shots long enough. I shifted our position, planted my hands on his chest, and shoved him onto the bed. Take your pants off, Enzo chuckled.
Wouldn't that have been easier before you pushed me down?
I bit back a smile. If he wanted to tease, I could tease too. I toyed with my breasts until my nipples hardened. Enzo lost his pants in record time. Straddling him, I rotated my hips until he pressed against my core. This man had the capacity to break me into 1,000,000 pieces. And I'm not talking about an orgasm, though he could do that too. He lifted his hips to speed things along, but I pulled back. I needed to flip the script, to do this differently, to remind myself this was sex with a friend, not a promise of more. I'm in charge.
All right. What do you want me to do?
He grinned. Now that's a loaded question. I wanted him inside me more than I wanted my next breath. But the idea of having such a powerful man at my mercy sent my imagination running wild. Lay on your back.
If you wanted to be on top.
He sprawled on the bed with his hands behind his head. I crawled up his body, noting how he tensed when he thought I'd straddle his hips again. I continued to move toward his head, and he furrowed his brow. Coming to my knees, I positioned myself over his face. Keep your hands at your side.
Yes, ma'am.
He laughed and licked my inner thigh. I grabbed the headboard and lowered my body. Enzo raised his head, but I rose just out of reach. When he lowered, I lowered. It took 2 more times, but the control freak finally understood what I wanted. I rolled my hips until his tongue pressed where I needed it, and rocked to set the rhythm. He took over from there. The position might have given me the upper hand, but Enzo played my body like he cooked, skilled, precise, and with an artistic flair. I held on to the headboard for dear life and prayed to anyone who would listen that I'd come before he sprained his tongue. So close, I can't. Enzo grabbed my hips and held me in place as his tongue moved in a quick but steady rhythm. He undid me in seconds, leaving me panting and begging for him to stop. Enzo didn't seem to know the meaning of the word stop. You don't know the meaning of following orders, but I'll let you slide this once.
How magnanimous of you.
He shifted his weight and sat upright, taking me with him. One moment I was straddling his face. The next, he had my upper back on his thighs and my legs draped over his shoulders. Stop, please. No. Bent like a misshapen paperclip, I couldn't roll to the side,
Couldn't close my legs. Couldn't take another second. He licked, nibbled, and sucked another orgasm out of me before he released my hips. I threw my arm over my face and tried to remember how to breathe, only vaguely aware that he'd put on a condom. Enzo moved between my rubbery legs and hovered. "May I make love to you now, mistress?" "Yes, please do, master of cheesy lines." Staring into my eyes, he pushed inside me. Each small fraction forward ignited my overly sensitive flesh until I couldn't take it. I lifted my hips, but he held in place. I made a sound that I'd never made before, something between a moan and a whimper. "Please." Nuzzling his cheek against mine, he whispered, "Do you want something?" "Yes, deeper. I need you inside me." He smiled against my cheek as he eased forward a little more. I might have played at taking control, but this man was a master. How can he hold back for so long? "Damn it, Enzo, give it to me." He thrust forward, burying himself. I gasped, digging my nails into his shoulders. Once again, I barely recognized the sounds coming out of my mouth. Enzo propped himself up on one elbow and turned my face toward his. "Look at me, Shanna." I held his gaze as he drew back and pressed forward, over and over. The slow pace accentuated the movement, intensifying the sensation, yet somehow prolonged my pleasure. Lowering his mouth to mine, he kissed me as leisurely as he moved his hips, like he had nothing to do for the next few years except me. Enzo rubbed his stubbly jaw over my cheek and increased the tempo. The pressure built inside me and spilled over so quickly that I had no choice but to cling to him until it passed. He held his breath and tensed. Exhaling my name, he gave one final thrust and pressed his brow to mine. "You're amazing." Still catching my breath, I nodded. Searching for my mouth, Enzo brushed his lips over my cheek like a blind man. The kiss felt different, almost reverent, before he rolled to his side and tucked me against his chest. I closed my eyes, wrapped warm and safe in his arms. In a moment of complete relaxation and utter stupidity, I uttered, "I love you."
Chapter 22. Enzo. I didn't dare move. Hell, I didn't dare breathe. Had she said what I thought she said? Mother of God, she told me she loves me. Don't panic. It took me a few seconds to realize Shanna had gone still beside me. Too still. I had no fucking clue what to say to her. I had feelings for her. If I were honest, I was falling hard for the pixie, but I'd never said those 3 little words to a woman. When I did, I wanted to be absolutely sure I meant them. "I didn't mean to say that. It's just..." She sighed and lifted her head to meet my gaze. "You just gave me my first set of multiple O's. Nothing that's said after sex counts." I brushed her hair back from her eyes. "It's okay. I feel like a dork." She covered her face. The most adorable dork I've ever seen. Nothing said in or immediately after the heat of passion counts. Everyone knows that. Shanna peeked at me from between her fingers. "Whew, I'm glad you agree. That would have been awkward." "But really? Heat of passion? Admit it. You're a closet romance reader." "What can I say? You bring out my inner Fabio." I smiled and pulled her close to hide my little white lie. As unprepared as I was for her to confess her feelings for me, I preferred her saying she loved me to acting as if the very notion was absurd. I waited until Shanna's breathing slowed and her body went limp beside me before easing my arm out from beneath her and rolling to my back. I'm in over my fucking head. I can't saddle her with my family and everything that comes along with it. This will never work between us, unless I walk away. The second of the top stairs squeaked and footsteps echoed on the hardwood floors in the hall. I blew it off as Hildy, going about her daily routine. Shanna stirred beside me. "What's that noise?" Probably one of Hildy's minions pushing a cleaning cart. I rolled to my side and brushed my fingers over her swollen lips. "Ready for round 2? Now, I haven't recovered from round 1. She might have protested, but the coy curve of her mouth told me she liked the idea. Any remaining doubt vanished when she pushed me to my back and slid on top of me. Drawing slow circles down her spine, I whispered, "Kiss me." Shanna brushed her lips over mine. A feather's touch, but it turned me on as much as the passionate exchanges we'd shared earlier. This kiss was knowing and sweet and full of promise. My cock hardened instantly, but the echo of those 3 words filled my head. She's looking at me all drowsy and sated and completely infatuated. She loves me, and I want it. I want her. Where did you go? Shanna sat upright, giving me a spectacular view of her bare chest. Raising my head, I nuzzled between her teardrop-shaped tits. I'm here in these spectacular breasts of yours. Thanks, but you're ridiculous. I can barely fill out a training bra. I circled her nipple with my tongue. I am ridiculous. Ridiculously hard and ridiculously ready to be inside you again. Loud knocking startled both of us. Eyes wide, mouths hanging open, we turned our heads toward the door as if we choreographed our reactions. I couldn't give 2 shits if any of the staff knew what we were up to, but I doubted Shanna felt the same. I met her gaze and pressed my finger to my lips before calling out, "I don't want to be disturbed." She bit her lip. Marco threw the door open. "Tough shit. Why are you sleeping in here?" "Oh." Shanna fell flat against my chest, eased off, and rolled herself in the comforter like a burrito. Great plan, except it only left me a few inches of cover. Laughing like a damned hyena, Marco shielded his face with his arm. "Dude, get dressed before you put someone's eye out. Leave." If I didn't care about the staff catching us, I sure as hell didn't care about my idiot little brother. However, I didn't intend to give him the opportunity to see more of Shanna's body. As it was, he'd gotten an eyeful of her exposed breast. He huffed. "You don't have to be rude about it. You're playing hide the sausage in my bed. Go, while you still have functioning kneecaps." I made it to the door in 3 bare-assed naked strides, shoved him into the hall, and slammed the door. Big threats for someone with his cock hanging out. Marco's laughter echoed down the hall. Shanna peeked from beneath the comforter. "You didn't tell me this was Marco's room." Snatching my jeans from the floor, I said, "It was his room when we were kids. None of us have lived here in years." She sat upright and tried in vain to smooth her hair. "Do you think he saw anything?" "Besides your tits? I doubt it." I planted a kiss on her forehead. "Gabe didn't tell me Marco was returning today. I should find out why he's here." "Go talk to Marco. I'll be down in a few minutes." I tugged on my t-shirt and grabbed my phone from the nightstand. No messages. Why didn't Gabe give me a heads up? What the hell is going on now? She stood and stretched. My mouth fell open. Had I not snapped it shut, my tongue would have lolled out like a cartoon dog. "You're making it hard to leave." Shanna turned and settled her gaze on my crotch. "So I see." "You're killing me." Groaning, I adjusted my erection. The little temptress crawled across the bed toward me. I'd seen videos of lionesses on the hunt with less predatory smiles. "You have 3 seconds to leave this room, or I will not be responsible for what happens next." Holy shit. Much more of this side of her and I'd become an addict. "I'll go, but you have to promise to crawl like that again, and often." Laughing, she tossed a pillow at me. "Go." I made a break for the bathroom before she obliterated the remainder of my willpower. A few splashes of cold water helped to clear my head, but my cock refused to cooperate. Since I had no intention of speaking to my brother with a raging hard-on, I conjured up every disgusting image I could think of while brushing my teeth. Big hairy guys, Leo dislocating a shoulder, Hazel's broken wrist. The memory of my assistant manager reminded me of the soup at Gabe and Maggie's engagement party. Given the nonstop drama since that night, could the poison minestrone be related? Once again, Nico's the common factor. I found Marco sitting at the kitchen table, scarfing down the remainder of Hildy's gumbo. "She made that for me, you know." He glanced up and grinned. "I figured, but I didn't think you'd be down in time to catch me." "Have you seen Hildy since you came home?" "She said she'd be in her room if we needed anything." He shrugged. "She looked like she had a cold." Hildy seemed perfectly fine when she'd gone out earlier in the day. I hoped her excursion hadn't taxed her. The woman was getting on in years. "Gabe didn't mention you were coming home today." I walked to the fridge and pulled out a couple of steaks. Sean and I hadn't seen food since breakfast. Not to mention, we'd worked up quite an appetite. We need carbs, potatoes. Marco hitched a shoulder. I didn't tell him. That's surprising. That any of my siblings would wipe their ass without checking with the all-knowing and powerful Gabriel shocked me. That Marco had left the country without checking sent a cold chill down my spine. I retrieved 3 baking potatoes from the pantry and walked to the sink. What was so important in New Orleans you'd risk it? He pushed the empty bowl away and looked me in the eye. You, bro? I ran away from home to talk to you. I paused mid-scrub and pointed the potato at him. Now I know you're full of shit. Marco drew his brows together. Is it that hard to believe I love you enough to cross an ocean to stop you from ruining your life? Yeah, it is. Smirking, I took my frustration out on the innocent vegetable. And how is it I'm ruining my life? My brother hung his head, drew a breath, and stood. Look, man, I know you have this rebel without a clue, loner thing going on, but that's on you. The rest of us love you, man. I had better things to do with my time than to discuss our dysfunctional family. Skip the brotherly love and get to the part where you flew in wearing a red cape to save me from myself. Scowling, he shook his head. This thing with the Lazios isn't going away. Which thing? I assumed he meant the arranged marriage between me and Nico, but wasn't sure. I've been out of the loop since Gabe sent me home to babysit. Marco smirked. Dude, you really need to get over that. Insecurity isn't a good look on you. Fuck off. I'm serious, he sighed. Gabe sent you here because he trusted you with his wife's best friend's life, and because he knew you were into her. I'd never thought of it like that. Would have been nice of him to tell me that. The Marchionni men aren't known for our conversational skills. Marco chuckled. Now that we've psychoanalyzed you, what are we going to do about the Lazios? They aren't going to let up until there's a wedding. They will, if Gabe agrees to business as usual. He looked at me as if I'd grown horns and a tail. You and I both know that isn't going to happen. Right. I shook the knife at him. Then someone needs to convince Nico that marrying me is a horrible idea. He snickered. We could do a press release detailing your erectile dysfunction and chronic STDs. Ha. I'd heard enough. Shanna would be down soon, and the last thing I needed was her overhearing any discussion of Nicolina. Nico doesn't want this marriage any more than you do. His tone grew serious. How do you know that? Marco hitched a shoulder. We've been talking since you tossed her out of the villa. Did she tell you she all but demanded I propose to her? Yes. She had her reasons, but it's not my place to tell you what they were. That's convenient. I rubbed the seasoning into the meat and washed my hands. She's a victim in this scenario, too. I walked to him, clamped my wet hands on his shoulders, and looked him square in the eyes. I appreciate you coming to tell me this, but you don't know what the hell you're talking about. Marco glared. I know you left the exterior security cameras on last night. I turned them off when I came home, but... My stomach sank. Shauna's going to kill me. Who saw the footage? Pops, for one. He took a step back. Ma had an epic meltdown, so I assumed she heard about it, if not witnessed it for herself. Christ, it was a miracle they hadn't called and chewed off half my ass. Marco plopped into a chair. How could you forget to turn them off? The feed goes live to Marchionni Corp security. Anyone with the password can log in and check it out. I barely heard a word he said through my pulse pounding behind my eardrums. Do me a favor. Don't mention this to Shanna. I should be the one to... Don't mention what to me? She stood in the doorway with her arms folded and her eyes narrowed.
Chapter 23. Shanna. In any other circumstance, I would have laughed. The two of them, Enzo and Marco, reacted like a couple of children caught stealing ice cream money from their mother's purse. Unfortunately for me, they weren't nabbing spare quarters from my change purse. From the sound of it, I'd interrupted a rather heated conversation. Well? I walked further into the room. Are one of you going to tell me what's going on? They exchanged glances. Poor Marco turned a weird shade of green. He inhaled and exhaled in such rapid succession I feared he'd hyperventilate. Clearly, I wasn't going to get anything out of him. I turned to Enzo. What's going on? He moved from behind the kitchen island.
There's no easy way to say this.
Nodding, I motioned for him to spill it.
The security cameras were on last night.
I'm so sorry. He pressed his lips together. Oh, God. I pressed my hand to my roiling stomach. Who saw?
Enzo sucked in a breath and stared at the ceiling. When he glanced back to me, I knew what he was about to say.
No! Your parents?
I wanted to dig a hole in the backyard and bury myself in it. But then again, the freaking security cameras would record my location. Evelyn would know where to excavate.
You said you'd take care of it.
His frown deepened. I had a lot on my mind today.
He's freaking blaming me for this?
I'd heard the expression seeing red many times, but until that moment, I hadn't believed it physically possible. Don't you dare put this on me. I asked you about the cameras last night, remember? Enzo had the good sense to dip his chin. I didn't mean for this to happen. I rounded on Marco. And you? What the hell were you thinking barging into the room like that? He held up his hands as if to deflect a blow. Why are you here? Don't tell me you flew 14 hours to tell Enzo your parents have a porno of us by the pool. Saying the words aloud made my head hurt.
How did we let this happen?
He glanced at Enzo. No. I stepped into Marco's line of vision. Don't you dare look at him. Look at me. Why are you here? I knew I'd taken a detour into Crazy Town, but I much preferred anger to turning into a blubbering mess. The waterworks would start the second I had a moment alone and not before. Shanna. Enzo pressed his chest to my back and wrapped his arms around me. Marco's here on business. He's not the enemy. His warmth melted away my anger, but without the armor I felt exposed and vulnerable. I'm sorry I barged in on you guys. Marco offered me a half smile. For what it's worth, I'm scarred for life after seeing Enzo in all his glory. And I'm sorry I yelled at you. I could see the humor in the situation, even if I wasn't ready to embrace it. If any of this had happened to someone else, I would have laughed for weeks. Should I be worried about your mother hiring a hitman to take me out? Enzo tensed behind me, and Marco flinched as if I'd struck him. Too soon for mob humor? I pulled out of Enzo's embrace. The brothers seemed to have an entire conversation of glances, frowns, shrugs, and nods. I sighed and turned to Marco. Relax. I put together you guys were involved in the mafia before Enzo confirmed it. His frown deepened. I wandered into the kitchen to put some space between us. Where's Hildy? Resting. She's not feeling well. Enzo pulled lettuce and several other veggies from the crisper drawer. I'm making dinner tonight. How do you like your steak? Bloody enough to moo and leave tracks in my potatoes. I motioned to the hall. Mind if I go check on her? Thank you. I'm sure she'd appreciate that. His expression went all gooey, like I'd presented him with a golden retriever puppy instead of suggesting I look in on the housekeeper. Marco quirked a brow at his brother and muttered something under his breath. Can it? Just like that, grumpy Enzo returned. Hildy's room is the third on the left. I'd always wanted siblings, but after witnessing the Marchionni brothers in action, I rethought the merits of being an only child. When Enzo said the third door, I'd assumed the housekeeper's room was close to the kitchen. I was wrong. The hall stretched and wound to the right and stretched again before I reached the room. The door stood partially open, but I didn't feel right peeking inside. Knocking lightly, I said, Hildy? It's Shanna. The elderly housekeeper called from inside. Come in, dear. I expected to enter a bedroom, but instead I found myself standing in a living room, flanked on one side by a kitchenette and the other by floor-to-ceiling bookcases. Hildy sat in a recliner with a blanket across her lap and a book in her hand. Do the boys need dinner?"
"No, ma'am." I hadn't called anyone ma'am since my booby passed away, but somehow it seemed right. "Enzo said you weren't feeling well. I thought I'd see if you needed anything." She smiled, but her eyes went soft and watery. "Thank you." Judging by her reaction, I had to wonder when the last time someone had shown interest in her as a person and not a servant. But hadn't Enzo said she and Evelyn were more friends than employee and employer? Was something else bothering her? Oh, God, the porno. Hildy motioned to an empty chair.
"I wouldn't mind a little company, if you have a few minutes."
"Sure." Sitting, I glanced over her extensive collection of well-worn paperbacks.
"Are you a reader?"
I shook my head. "I always wanted to be, but I'm dyslexic."
"So am I. Of course, they didn't call it that back when I was in school."
Laughing, she set her romance novel aside.
"It takes me so long to get through a book. By the time I finish, I forget what happened in the beginning."
"Sometimes I forget what happened at the start of the page. I get so frustrated when I know I'm mixing up the letters and sounds. I can't focus on the story."
Hildy nodded. "I think that's why I read the same books over and over."
"I wish I had that kind of patience. I give up long before I finish."
"Patience is easier to come by when you're my age."
She laughed.
"What do you do for a living?"
"I'm training to be a private investigator, but I can't seem to pass the exam."
Nodding, Hildy looked away. "I wanted to be a bookkeeper. I've always been good with numbers, but getting the certificate required reading. My parents were so disappointed when I dropped out of school."
"I can relate. My mom's a doctor. She always has a book in her hand. It drives her nuts that I'm not smart like her." My cheeks flushed. I hadn't admitted that out loud to anyone besides Maggie.
"Don't you dare give up on your dreams, and don't let anyone make you believe you're less than them because you have a different way of learning." She made a tisking sound. "Mothers are their children's biggest fans and worst critics."
I had a feeling we weren't talking about my mom any longer. "Like Evelyn?" Cocking her head, Hildy stared as if she could see directly into my soul. It dawned on me, a few seconds too late, that Evelyn had probably given Hildy an earful about the security footage. I looked away so fast, I nearly sprained my eyeballs.
"Do you mind if I give you some personal advice?"
Her voice softened. "Sure."
I braced myself for words of wisdom like, "Keep your clothes on while swimming," or "Lock the bedroom door." If you love Enzo, don't let anyone or anything get in the way.
Stunned, I met her gaze. She smiled.
"You do, don't you? Love him?"
The air left my lungs in a gush, and my throat tightened to the point I doubted I could speak. Instead, I nodded and hung my head.
"He's as stubborn as they come, but I believe he's falling for you, too."
She waited until I met her gaze before continuing.
"Evelyn may never approve, but this isn't about her. It's between you and Enzo. You make sure it stays that way."
"I'll try, but it feels like rolling a boulder up a greased hill."
Once again, I had the feeling she knew something I didn't. Before I could ask, a buzzing sound filled the room.
Hildy frowned at the clock on the wall and pushed the footstool of the recliner down.
"Who in the world is ringing the doorbell this time of night?"
I shot to my feet. "You're not feeling well. I'll get it."
She gave me a patient smile on her way out of the room. Sweet girl. At my age, a little worry and a broken heart aren't reasons to slack off my duties. They're reminders I'm still alive.
Broken heart? Was she that upset about my relationship? I had questions, and more were forming by the second. I followed her down the hall. Don't worry about me and Enzo. We'll figure it out. But if you know something I don't—"
"He hasn't told you?"
She spared me a quick glance.
"I know about the security footage." I hustled to keep up, despite the fact we were about the same height. "No, not that." Lowering her voice, she stopped in the foyer. "About Nicolina Lazio." I knew she wanted my man, and I knew Evelyn would love to see the two of them together. But otherwise, I had no freaking clue.
"What about her?"
The bell rang again. I've said more than I should have already. "Sit him down and ask him." Hildy opened the door. None other than the woman of conversation herself stood on the front porch. Nicolina freaking Lazio.
This has been part 2 of Highball and Chain. Written by Kathryn M. Hearst. Narrated by Aaron Shedlock and Virginia Rose. If you enjoyed this audiobook, please subscribe to Kathryn's channel where Enzo and Shanna's story continues. While you're there, be sure to check out Kathryn's other novels.